7 things the Stoics did to never be affected. Stoicism. Imagine for a moment that you could weather any storm in life without losing your inner peace. Imagine facing devastating criticism, irreparable losses, profound betrayals, and still remain unshaken, centered, in complete control of your emotions and decisions. Sound impossible? For the Stoics of antiquity, this was not only possible, it was the default way of life. Marcus Aurelius ruled the greatest empire in the ancient world through devastating plagues and endless wars, maintaining his serenity and wisdom. Epictetus rose from slave to one of the most influential philosophers in history, transforming every adversity into wisdom. Seneca faced exile, the loss of fortune, and even the death sentence with a calmness that defied all common logic. What did these men know that we have forgotten? What was the secret that allowed them to remain unfazed in the face of circumstances that would destroy most of us? The answer doesn't lie in some superhuman strength or special privilege. It lies in 7 fundamental practices that anyone can learn and apply. Practices so powerful that they've transformed ordinary men into philosophical legends, and that can transform your life today, right now. We live in an age of chronic anxiety. Every notification on your phone can trigger a crisis. Every conversation can become a conflict. Each day seems to bring new reasons for worry, fear, anger, or frustration. We're bombarded with opinions, judgments, expectations, and demands that pull us in 1,000 different directions. And in the midst of this chaos, we lose something fundamental, the ability to remain centered, to maintain our inner peace, regardless of what's happening around us. But what if I told you there's a path tested over 2,000 years ago? A set of mental tools so effective they've stood the test of time, spanning empires, cultures, and civilizations, and have reached us with the same transformative power. These aren't abstract theories or empty concepts. They're concrete, applicable practices you can start using today to shield your mind from life's turbulence. Before I reveal these 7 transformative practices, I need to issue an important warning. What you're about to discover may challenge everything you believe about how to deal with problems, emotions, and adversity. Stoicism isn't about suppressing feelings or becoming an emotionless robot. It's about something much deeper and more powerful. It's about achieving a state of practical wisdom where you respond to life rather than just react to it, where you consciously choose how to interpret and handle each situation, where you become the author of your own narrative, no matter what the external circumstances. If you're tired of being tossed around by life's waves, if you're exhausted from living in reactive mode, always putting out fires and never in control, then pay close attention to what comes next. Because these 7 practices aren't just philosophical concepts, they're your map to emotional freedom, your compass for navigating turbulent waters, your armor against the arrows of fate. And the most extraordinary thing, you don't need anything special to get started. Just the willingness to question your current patterns and the courage to experiment with a new way of living. The dichotomy of control, the first and most fundamental practice the Stoics mastered was something so simple it seems obvious, yet so profound it can completely revolutionize your life. The clear distinction between what is under your control and what is not. Epictetus, who knew both slavery and freedom, summed it up brilliantly. Some things are under our control and some are not. Sounds too simple to be revolutionary, doesn't it? But let me show you why this single distinction is the foundation of all Stoic inner peace. Think about how many hours of your day you spend worrying about things you can't control. The behavior of others, the weather, traffic, the economy, political decisions, the past that is gone, the uncertain future. Now imagine all that mental energy, all that time, all that worry instantly redirected to the only realm where you have absolute power. Your choices, your actions, your thoughts, your responses. The Stoics understood that the source of all unnecessary suffering lies in trying to control the uncontrollable and neglecting what we can actually control. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire in crisis, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Imagine the pressure of governing Rome during a plague that killed thousands daily, with barbarians on the borders, traitorous generals conspiring, and the weight of millions of lives on his decisions. How did he maintain his sanity? By obsessively focusing on what was within his control. His decisions, his integrity, his response to challenges. He couldn't control whether the plague would spread, but he could control how he would respond to it. He couldn't control whether he would be betrayed, but he could control how he would handle the betrayal. This practice begins with a mental exercise the Stoics practiced daily. Before any worry takes over your mind, ask yourself, is this within my control? If the answer is no, you immediately release that worry. It's not neglect or indifference. It's practical wisdom. It's recognizing that your mental energy is a finite and precious resource that should be invested where it can make a real difference. Let's make this practical and tangible. Imagine you're in traffic, late for an important meeting. Traffic is not within your control. Getting angry, honking, and cursing at other drivers won't make cars go faster. But what is within your control? Your attitude, your breathing, how you use this time. You might choose to call to let someone know you're running late. You might use the time to listen to an educational audiobook or podcast. You might practice breathing exercises to arrive calmly at the meeting. The external situation is identical, but your internal experience is completely transformed. The Stoics took this to the extreme. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, regularly practiced sleeping on the hard floor and eating only bread and water for days. Why? To remind himself that external comfort was not under his control, but his ability to be happy regardless of the circumstances was. He wrote, "Every new event should be met with the reflection, 'This was beyond my control.'" When Nero, the paranoid emperor, ordered his death, Seneca faced it with such calm that it became legendary. He couldn't control the death sentence, but he could control how he would die, with dignity, philosophizing until his last breath. This dichotomy of control isn't just a mental technique. It's a complete rethinking of how you interact with reality. When someone insults you, the insult isn't in your control, but your response is. When you lose your job, the loss isn't in your control, but what you do next is. When someone you love disappoints you, their disappointment isn't in your control, but how you choose to process and respond to it is. The power of this practice lies in its consistent application. It's not something you do once and done. It's a mental muscle you develop through daily repetition. Each time you catch yourself wasting mental energy on the uncontrollable, you gently redirect your attention to what you can control. Over time, this becomes automatic. You develop what the Stoics called an inner citadel, an inviolable mental space where no external circumstances can enter without your permission. But here's the fascinating paradox. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you gain more control over your life than you ever imagined possible. When you accept that you can't control whether you pass that job interview, you paradoxically perform better because you're focused on what you can control: your preparation, your presentation, your answers. When you accept that you can't control whether your partner will change, you can focus on what you can control: your own actions, boundaries, and decisions. The practice of cosmic perspective. The Stoics' second secret weapon against life's disruptions was something they called the view from above. the ability to zoom out, to see your current situation from a cosmic perspective that instantly diminishes the weight of problems that seem enormous up close. Marcus Aurelius practiced this regularly, imagining himself rising higher and higher, seeing first his city, then his country, then the continent, the planet, the solar system, until his monumental problems revealed themselves for what they really were: small, temporary ripples in the infinite vastness of time and space. This isn't an escape from reality or a minimization of real problems. It's a recalibration of perspective that prevents minor issues from consuming disproportionate energy. When you're immersed in a conflict at work, that discussion can feel like the center of the universe. But when you apply cosmic perspective, asking yourself, will this matter in 5 years, in a year, in a month? Suddenly, the situation reshapes. What seemed like an insurmountable mountain reveals itself as a small, temporary obstacle. The Stoics were masters at contextualizing their experiences within the grand narrative of the cosmos. Seneca wrote, "Each new generation laughs at the old fads, but religiously follows the new." He understood that what seems urgent and important today and will be forgotten tomorrow, that the crises that consume us will be irrelevant footnotes in history. This perspective didn't make the Stoics indifferent. On the contrary, it freed them to focus on what truly mattered: virtue, character, lasting contribution. Imagine applying this to your life now. That social media post that received criticism and is eroding your peace of mind. In a week, no one will remember it. That mistake at work that seems to have ruined your reputation. In a few months, it will be just a lesson learned. That rejection from a lover that feels like the end of the world. The universe existed for billions of years before you were born and will continue for billions after. This doesn't diminish the validity of your feelings, but it places them in a framework that prevents them from completely dominating your existence. Marcus Aurelius took this further, regularly contemplating the transitory nature of everything. He wrote, "Observe how all things are continually changing, and accustom yourself to thinking that the nature of the universe loves nothing more than to change the things that are, and to create new, similar forms." This awareness of universal impermanence wasn't morbid, it was liberating. When you truly internalize that everything is temporary, problems lose their power to paralyze you. The practice of cosmic perspective also included what the Stoics called memento mori, remembering death. Not as a morbid exercise, but as a powerful reminder of finitude that gives urgency and clarity to our choices. Seneca advised, "Let each day be lived as if it were your last." When you maintain the awareness that your time is limited, the small daily irritations, the noisy neighbor, the annoying co-worker, the frustrating traffic, suddenly seem like wastes of time, too precious to deserve your emotional energy. This cosmic perspective also extended to understanding our place in the great web of existence. The Stoics saw each human being as part of a greater whole, a rational, interconnected cosmos. Marcus Aurelius expressed it beautifully. What is good for the hive is good for the bee. When you see yourself as part of something larger, your personal problems gain context. You're not the center of the universe suffering unique injustices. You're part of a shared human experience where everyone faces challenges, losses, and hardships. Practically, this means developing the habit of regularly stepping back and examining your situation from multiple perspectives. When something upsets you, ask yourself, how would I see this 10 years from now? How would someone in a much worse situation see my problem? How would it look to someone observing Earth from space? These questions aren't meant to minimize genuinely difficult experiences, but to calibrate your emotional response accordingly. The Stoics also practiced what we might call historical perspective, studying history to understand that human problems are remarkably consistent across time. People have always dealt with betrayal, loss, illness, injustice. Knowing that you are not the first, nor will you be the last to face your particular challenge, offers both solace and strength. You are part of a long line of human beings who have survived and even thrived through similar or worse hardships. The negative morning exercise. The third practice that shielded the Stoics from life's disruptions was something that might seem counterintuitive at first glance. They deliberately visualized negative scenarios before they happened. Called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evil, this mental exercise wasn't pessimism or paranoia, but a sophisticated form of psychological preparation that made them virtually immune to unpleasant surprises. Seneca explained, "What is unexpected has a crushing effect, and surprise increases the weight of calamities. Therefore, nothing should be unexpected by us." Each morning, the Stoics took time to imagine potential losses: the death of loved ones, the loss of wealth, illness, betrayal, failure, not as a way to invite negativity, but as a method of mental inoculation. Once you've mentally considered and accepted a possibility, it loses much of its power to devastate you if it actually occurs. Imagine a fighter who trains for every possible strike versus one who only practices his favorite moves. When the prepared fighter receives an unexpected blow, he already has a ready response. The unprepared fighter is caught off guard and knocked out. The Stoics were mental fighters who trained for every blow life could throw at them. They didn't live in constant fear. On the contrary, this preparation freed them from fear because it eliminated the element of surprise. Marcus Aurelius practiced this by visualizing the death of his children, not out of morbidity, but to cherish every moment with them and be mentally prepared, stopped for a loss that was common in his time. He wrote, "As you kiss your child, say to yourself, tomorrow you may be dead." This may seem morbid to our modern sensibilities, but there was profound wisdom in it. When you accept the impermanence of everything you love, you stop taking things for granted. Every moment becomes precious, not wasted on trivial irritations. This exercise also served another crucial purpose: distinguishing between imagined loss and real loss. Often, the fear of loss is worse than the loss itself. When you deliberately imagine losing something and mentally process that loss, you often discover that you would survive better than you thought. Seneca regularly practiced living like a poor man for a few days, eating simple food, wearing old clothes, sleeping on hard surfaces. Then he would ask himself, "Is this what I so feared?" The answer invariably was that reality was far less terrible than the fear. Negative premeditation also involved preparing specific responses to negative scenarios. It wasn't just imagining problems, but planning exactly how you would respond to them. If I lose my job, I will do X, Y, and Z. If my relationship ends, I will focus on A, B, and C. If I get sick, my priority will be D, E, and F. This advanced planning means that if the worst happens, you don't have to make decisions in an altered emotional state. You already have a rational plan prepared when you were calm and thinking clearly. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology confirms. Anxious anticipation is often worse than the actual event. When you deliberately face your fears head-on in a controlled visualization environment, they lose much of their power. It's like watching a horror movie with the lights on. The monsters seem much less scary when you can see them clearly, but there was an important subtlety to this practice. It wasn't about obsessively dwelling on negativity. It was a structured, time-limited exercise with a specific purpose. The Stoics didn't spend all day imagining disasters. They would set aside a specific time for this, mentally process the possibilities, develop contingency plans, and then move on with their day, freed from the weight of unexamined anxiety. This practice also cultivated what the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate. When you have mentally accepted all possibilities, including the negative ones, you can embrace whatever actually happens. It's not passive resignation, but active acceptance. Nietzsche, heavily influenced by the Stoics, expressed this as wanting each moment to be exactly as it is, because you understand that you are part of a chain of causes and effects that led you to where you are. Negative forethought also served as a constant reminder of impermanence. Buddhists have a similar concept with meditation on death. When you regularly contemplate loss, you develop a healthier relationship with the possessions, people, and circumstances in your life. You appreciate them more deeply while you have them, but you are also prepared to let them go when the time comes. Fortress through voluntary adversity. The fourth practice that made the Stoics imperturbable was something that would seem crazy to most modern people. They deliberately exposed themselves to discomfort and hardship when they could easily have avoided it. It wasn't masochism or self-punishment, but strategic training that built mental and emotional resilience, the way physical exercise builds muscle. Seneca, one of the richest men in Rome, regularly slept on the ground, fasted, took cold baths, and wore the simplest clothing. Why? He explained. It is precisely in times of immunity from misfortune that the soul must fortify itself for occasions of greatest stress. It is in times of peace that the soldier practices maneuvers, builds fortifications, and fatigues himself with unnecessary labor so as to be prepared for what is necessary. This wisdom is timeless. Just as an unchallenged muscle atrophies, a mind that never faces discomfort becomes frail. Voluntary adversity served multiple purposes. First, it destroyed the fear of discomfort. When you regularly choose to experience cold, hunger, or physical discomfort, these states lose their power to frighten you. You discover they are temporary, bearable, and often less terrifying than your imagination suggested. Second, it built deep confidence. Each time you voluntarily face and overcome discomfort, you prove to yourself that you are stronger than you thought. Cato the Younger took this to the extreme. He deliberately walked barefoot in public, wore unfashionable clothes, and exposed himself to social ridicule. Why? To become immune to public opinion. He believed that if you could willingly endure embarrassment and judgment, no social pressure could force you to compromise your principles. And it worked. Cato became legendary for his unyielding integrity, preferring suicide to living under Caesar's tyranny. This practice wasn't about suffering for the sake of suffering. It was about calibrating your comfort thermostat. Modern people live in an extremely narrow comfort zone. Any deviation from the perfect temperature, the perfect food, the perfect circumstances causes disproportionate stress. The Stoics deliberately expanded their comfort zone until very little could disturb them. They could enjoy luxury when available, but they didn't depend on it for happiness. Marcus Aurelius, despite being an emperor with access to every imaginable luxury, often chose simplicity. He slept in military tents during campaigns when he could have had mobile palaces. He ate the same food as his soldiers when he could have had banquets. This wasn't just leading by example, it was constant self-training. He wrote, "Trust yourself, and you will know how to live." This confidence came from knowing from experience that he could thrive under any circumstances. Modern, voluntary adversity may look different, but the principle remains. Taking cold showers, intermittent fasting, exercising in uncomfortable conditions, choosing the harder option when the easier one is available, all these practices build the same kind of resilience the Stoics cultivated. It's not about torturing yourself, but about gradually expanding your ability to cope with discomfort. There is modern science to support this ancient wisdom. The concept of hormesis, where small stresses actually strengthen an organism, validates what the Stoics intuitively understood. Just as vaccines use weakened pathogens to build immunity, voluntary adversity uses controlled discomfort to build psychological resilience. The Stoics also understood that excessive comfort creates its own form of suffering. Seneca observed that the rich were often more miserable than the poor because they had more to lose and lived in constant fear of that loss. By regularly experiencing voluntary deprivation, you break the power that possessions have over you. You discover that genuine happiness comes from within, not from external circumstances. This practice also cultivated deep gratitude. When you voluntarily experience lack, you develop a genuine appreciation for abundance. A hot bath is infinitely more pleasurable when you know the discomfort of cold. A simple meal becomes a feast when you know hunger. The Stoics took nothing for granted because they regularly reminded themselves what it would be like to live without. Perhaps most importantly, voluntary adversity built what the Stoics called the discipline of desire. In a world that constantly tells us we need more comfort, more pleasure, more possessions, the ability to be satisfied with less is revolutionary. It's not about deprivation, but about freedom. When you don't need much to be happy, very little can make you unhappy. The ritual of reserved judgment, the fifth tool in the Stoic arsenal against disruption, was a subtle but profoundly powerful mental practice, suspending automatic judgments about events. The Stoics understood that it is not the events themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Epictetus taught, "Men are not disturbed by things, but by the opinions they form of them." This single insight, when truly understood and applied, has the power to completely transform your life experience. Imagine you receive a message from your boss saying, "We need to talk." Immediately your mind may race. "I'm going to be fired. I've done something wrong. My career is ruined." Your heart races, your palms sweat, you spiral into anxiety. But notice, nothing has actually happened yet. It's just a neutral message. All suffering comes from the judgments and stories you've created about it. The Stoics trained to intercept this automatic judgment process. Marcus Aurelius practiced describing events in purely objective terms, devoid of emotional judgment. Where others would see a devastating betrayal, he would see a person acted according to their nature and perception of self-interest. Where others would see a humiliating failure, he would see a different than expected outcome that offers information for future adjustment. This wasn't denial or emotional suppression. It was linguistic precision that prevented unnecessary emotional reactions. The power of this practice lies in recognizing the space between stimulus and response. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, influenced by Stoicism, said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." The Stoics were masters at expanding that space, creating a moment of pause where they could consciously choose how to interpret and respond to each situation. Consider how we automatically apply judgments to neutral events. Rain on your wedding day, disaster. But in some cultures, rain at a wedding is considered good luck. Being rejected for a job, failure. But how many people later discovered that that rejection directed them towards something better? The Stoics understood that most of our automatic judgments are arbitrary, culturally conditioned, and often incorrect. Seneca illustrated this with the example of death. For most, death is the ultimate evil, but he argued, every new birth is a death to another state. What we fear as death is merely transformation. By questioning the automatic judgment that death is terrible, he removed much of its power to cause anticipated suffering. It wasn't nihilism, it was freedom from unnecessary terror. Reserved judgment doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means consciously choosing your interpretations rather than being a slave to automatic reactions. When someone insults you, you can choose to see it as, an opportunity to practice patience, a revelation of their character, not yours. A chance to examine whether there's truth in the insult that you could use for growth, or simply as sounds, someone made that have no inherent power over you. This practice extended to what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, questioning judgments about what is good or bad. Is health good? Generally, yes, but how many people have turned illness into catalysts for profound positive change? Is wealth good? Maybe, but how many people have been corrupted or made miserable by it? The Stoics understood that very few things are inherently good or bad. It is our use of them that determines their value. Epictetus used the example of a favorite cup. When you judge the cup as special and irreplaceable, its breakage becomes a tragedy. But if you see it as a cup like millions of others temporarily in my possession, its breakage is merely a neutral event. The object is the same, the event is the same, but your experience is completely different based on your judgment. Daily, practice involved what we might call objective labeling. When confronted with a situation, first describe it in purely factual terms. Instead of, I was humiliated at the meeting, it would be, so-and-so expressed disagreement with my proposal in front of 12 people. Instead of, my day is ruined, it would be, my original plan for today will need to be adjusted. This linguistic precision may seem pedantic, but it has profound psychological effects. The Stoics also recognized that many judgments come from comparison. What do you judge your situation to be bad compared to? Your past life? The lives of others? A fantasy of how are things supposed to be? By questioning these comparisons, you often discover that your suffering stems not from the situation itself, but from comparing it to an imagined ideal. Virtue as an absolute anchor. The sixth practice that made the Stoics unshakable was perhaps the most radical. They completely anchored their worth and happiness in something that no external force could take away: their virtue, their character, their moral integrity. While most people derive their sense of worth from external things, success, appearance, wealth, status, approval, the Stoics understood that all of these things can be lost in an instant. But their virtue, that was completely under their control, and no one could take it away. Epictetus, who spent years as a slave, understood this viscerally. His master could control his body, but not his mind. He could force him to work, but he could not force him to betray his principles. He could hurt him physically, but he could not touch his integrity. This realization made him, in a sense, real, freer than his master. He said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The Stoics defined virtue through four cardinal qualities: wisdom, the ability to judge correctly; justice, treating others fairly; courage, doing the right thing despite fear; and temperance, self-control and moderation. These were not abstract ideals, but concrete daily practices. Every decision, every action, every response was an opportunity to exercise virtue. The revolutionary power of this approach lies in its complete independence from external outcomes. You can act with perfect virtue and still fail in your external goals. You can be honest and be punished for it. You can be courageous and lose. You can be just and be treated unfairly. But for the Stoics, the exercise of virtue itself was victory, regardless of the outcome. Marcus Aurelius, facing plagues, wars, and betrayals, wrote, "Only one thing matters, to act or not to act according to the natural constitution of man." For him, governing Rome well was secondary to governing oneself well. Military success was less important than moral integrity. Popularity was irrelevant compared to doing what was right. This orientation toward virtue provided an infallible moral compass in complex situations. When faced with difficult decisions, the Stoics didn't ask, "What will benefit me most?" or "What will make me look better?" but "What does virtue demand?" This simplicity cut through the rationalizations and justifications that typically cloud our judgment. Consider how this transforms the experience of injustice. If someone steals from you, the material loss is theirs to inflict, but your response is yours. You can choose bitterness and revenge, corrupting your own character, or you can choose justice and temperance, keeping your integrity intact. The thief may have taken your money, but only you can steal your own virtue. Seneca took this to its logical extreme when Nero ordered his suicide. Instead of begging, fleeing, or compromising his principles, he accepted death with such grace that he inspired generations. His last words were, "About philosophy and virtue, Nero could take your life, but he could not take your dignity. He could kill your body, but he could not touch your character." This anchor in virtue also freed the Stoics from the crushing weight of public opinion. Cato the Younger was famous for his indifference to what others thought of him. He wore unfashionable clothes, went barefoot, and took unpopular positions because they were right. When criticized, he replied, "I would rather be asked why I don't have a statue than why I have one." Daily practice involved constantly checking your motivations. Are you doing this because it's right or because it will look good? Are you avoiding it out of fear of judgment or because it genuinely violates your principles? Are you pursuing this because it aligns with virtue or because it promises external rewards? The Stoics understood that virtue is its own reward. The peace of conscience that comes from knowing you acted with integrity regardless of the consequences is a pleasure deeper than any sensory pleasure. The self-respect that comes from maintaining your principles under pressure is more valuable than any external respect. But perhaps most importantly, anchoring yourself in virtue makes you genuinely free. When your happiness depends on external things, you are a slave to them. You need the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect circumstances. But when your happiness comes from living according to your values, you can find contentment in any situation. Connecting to the universal logos, the seventh and perhaps most profound practice that shielded the Stoics from disruption was their conscious connection to what they called the logos, the universal reason that governs the cosmos. This was not a vague religious belief, but a philosophical understanding that everything in the universe is interconnected, following rational natural laws, and that every event, no matter how chaotic, is part of a greater order. The Stoics saw the universe not as a random collection of atoms, but as a living, rational organism where each part affects the whole. Marcus Aurelius expressed this poetically. Constantly consider the universe as a single living being, having one substance and one soul. This perspective radically transformed how they experienced seemingly negative events. If everything is interconnected, if everything follows natural laws, then even adversity is part of a greater order that our limited perspective cannot fully comprehend. This connection with the Logos was not fatalistic passivity. It was active participation in the cosmic order. The Stoics believed that humans, unique among animals, possessed reason, logos with a lowercase l, which was literally a fragment of the universal logos. When you act rationally, virtuously, you are aligned with the very structure of the universe. When you act irrationally, driven by uncontrolled passions, you are fighting the nature of things. Imagine the difference between swimming against the current or going with it. Both require effort, but one leads to exhaustion and frustration, the other to graceful progress. The Stoics consciously chose to align their will with the Logos, accepting what they could not change while acting virtuously within what they could control. It wasn't about giving up, but about the wisdom of choosing your battles. Epictetus used the metaphor of a dog tied to a cart. The dog can choose to resist being dragged painfully, or it can choose to walk along, maintaining its dignity. The cart, fate, logos, will steer its course regardless, but the dog, we, has a choice in how it experiences the journey. This metaphor perfectly captures the Stoic balance between acceptance and agency. The daily practice of connecting with the Logos involved what Marcus Aurelius called the cosmic view, regularly contemplating your place in the grand scheme of things, recognizing that you are both infinitesimally small and infinitely important. Small because you are just one among billions, a fleeting moment in eternity. Important because you are the only instance of consciousness at your exact point in space-time, capable of choices that ripple through the web of causality. This connection also meant recognizing that obstacles were often opportunities in disguise. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." If the Logos governs everything, then every challenge is perfectly calibrated for your growth. The difficult person in your life is there to teach you patience. Failure is there to teach you humility and resilience. Loss is there to teach detachment and appreciation. Seneca expressed this as amor fati, love of fate. Not merely accepting what happens, but actively embracing it as necessary and beneficial. When you truly understand that you are connected to the Logos, that you are part of something infinitely greater and wiser than your individual perspective, you can find meaning even in suffering. The Stoics also derived deep comfort from knowing they were fulfilling their cosmic function. Just as a bee fulfills its nature by producing honey and pollinating plants, humans fulfill their nature through reason and virtue. When you act according to your rational nature, you are literally doing what the cosmos designed you to do. This perspective also cultivated deep humility and patience. If the Logos governs everything, then other people are also acting according to causes and effects that you don't fully understand. The person who angered you is fighting their own battles, shaped by their own experiences, doing the best they can with their understanding. This understanding does not excuse bad behavior, but it removes the poison of personal hatred. Connecting with the Logos also meant recognizing natural cycles and patterns. Just as the seasons change, life has its own rhythms of growth and decline, gain and loss, joy and sorrow. Resisting these cycles is like being irritated by winter for being cold. The Stoics accepted these natural rhythms, adapting to them rather than wasting energy wishing they were different. Practically, this meant developing what we might call systems awareness, always considering how your actions affect the whole, how the whole affects you, and how everything is interconnected. Your choices do not exist in a vacuum. Every action creates ripples. Every decision affects the web. This awareness both humbles and empowers. You are just a thread, but a necessary thread in the cosmic tapestry. Applying the 7 practices to your life, now that we've explored the 7 fundamental practices that made the Stoics unflappable, the crucial question is, how can you apply them to your modern life with its unique challenges, pressures, and complexities? The beauty of Stoicism is that it doesn't require mountain retreats, vows of silence, or abandonment of modern life. These practices were developed by people deeply engaged in the world, emperors, senators, merchants, soldiers, and are perfectly applicable to your life now. Start with the dichotomy of control. This morning, before you even get out of bed, make a quick mental list. What is in my control today? My choices, my actions, my responses, my effort. What isn't? The weather, other people's moods, the traffic, the end results. This simple categorization exercise can transform your entire day. When traffic is bad, you'll remember not in my control. When someone is rude, you'll think, their rudeness isn't under my control, but my response is. Develop a 5-minute morning ritual where you practice cosmic perspective. It can be literal, looking up at the sky and contemplating the vastness of the universe, or mental, imagining your current situation from the perspective of 10 years in the future. Ask yourself, will this matter in a year, in 5 years? This practice alone can eliminate 80% of your daily worries, revealing them as storms in a teacup that feel like tsunamis just because you're looking too closely. For negative premeditation, take a few minutes each Sunday to consider what could go wrong in the coming week. Not with paranoia, but with calm preparation. If the project fails, if there's a conflict with so-and-so, my approach will be, this advanced planning means you're never completely caught off guard. You always have a plan B, C, and D. Anxiety decreases dramatically when you know you can handle any scenario. Incorporate voluntary adversity in small but consistent ways. Take a cold shower once a week. Skip a meal occasionally. Walk instead of driving when possible. Sleep on the floor 1 night a month. These aren't punishments, but reminders that you're more resilient than you think, that comfort is nice but not necessary for happiness. Practice reserved judgment with a simple exercise. When something happens that would normally provoke a strong, emotional reaction, pause and describe the situation in purely factual terms. Instead of "I was betrayed," try "Person X acted differently than I expected based on previous conversations." This linguistic precision creates space between event and reaction, allowing for conscious choice rather than automatic outburst. Anchor yourself in virtue by asking a simple question before every important decision. What would the best version of me do? Not what would be easiest, most profitable, or most popular, but what would align with your deepest values. At the end of each day, review. Did I act with wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance today? Where you succeeded, acknowledge it. Where you failed, learn without self-flagellation. Cultivate connection with the Logos through study and contemplation. Read history to see recurring patterns. Study nature to understand cycles. Observe how everything is interconnected, how every action creates reactions, how order emerges from apparent chaos. Develop the habit of looking for the hidden benefit in every obstacle, the lesson in every failure, the growth in every challenge. But here's the most important secret. Start small. Don't try to implement all 7 practices perfectly from day one. Choose one, perhaps the dichotomy of control because it's the most fundamental, and practice it consistently for a week. When it becomes more natural, add another practice. Stoicism is not about instant perfection, but about constant progress. Create reminders in your environment. A post-it note on the bathroom mirror. What's in my control today? A notification on your phone at 2 p.m. Cosmic perspective. Will this matter in a year? An alarm before bed. What virtues did I practice today? These small nudges keep the practices alive in your consciousness until they become automatic. Find your own version of the practices. Maybe your voluntary adversity is speaking in public despite fear. Maybe your negative premeditation is about specific professional scenarios. Maybe your connection with the Logos comes through meditation, nature, or art. The principles are universal, but the application is personal. Remember, the Stoics were not emotionless robots. They felt fear, sadness, and frustration like everyone else. The difference is that they were not controlled by these emotions. They experienced them, processed them, and then chose their responses based on wisdom and virtue, not emotional impulse. You are not trying to eliminate emotions, but to develop mastery over your responses. Be patient with yourself. Marcus Aurelius, even though he was a dedicated practitioner, constantly reminded himself of the same principles in his meditations. If the philosopher-emperor needed constant reminders, we certainly do too. Each day is a new opportunity to practice. Each situation is a new test. Each choice is a chance for growth. Use the community as support. Ancient Stoics corresponded, debated, and supported each other. Find others interested in practical philosophy. Share your experiences, challenges, and insights. The path to wisdom need not be lonely. Online, there are vibrant communities of modern Stoic practitioners sharing similar journeys. Turning challenges into fuel. One of the most powerful revelations of Stoicism is that the very challenges we try to avoid are actually the fuel for our growth and strengthening. The Stoics didn't just tolerate adversity, they embraced it as precious opportunities for development. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly. The fire that consumes everything thrown at it, transforming it into flame and light, so too the wise man transforms every obstacle into material for his progress. Think of how a muscle grows. It's not through comfort and rest, but through endurance and recovery. When you lift weights, you're literally inflicting micro-traumas on your muscle fibers. It's the recovery from these traumas that builds strength. The Stoics understood that the same principle applies to character and mental resilience. Every challenge is a weight that, when lifted properly, strengthens your ability to handle future weights. Seneca wrote extensively about this after his exile in Corsica. Instead of being consumed with bitterness over the injustice of his punishment, he used the time to deepen his philosophy, write some of his most important works, and prove to himself that he could find contentment anywhere. Exile, intended as punishment, became his laboratory for personal growth. He emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient than he had ever been. This mindset completely transforms how you experience hardship. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How can I use this to grow?" Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance, you see yourself as an athlete in training, and each challenge is part of your conditioning program. The difficult person at work? They're your personal trainer in patience. The financial crisis? They're your crash course in creativity and resilience. The health problem? They're your teacher in perspective and gratitude. Epictetus, with his unique experience of slavery, offered a radical perspective. Be grateful for your problems, not superficially or forcedly, but with a genuine recognition that without challenges, you would remain weak, untested, and underdeveloped. He compared it to a fighter giving thanks for a strong opponent. Only by facing formidable adversaries do you discover and develop your true capabilities. The Stoics also understood that adversity reveals character. It's easy to be calm when everything is going well, generous when you have abundance, courageous when there is no danger. But who you truly are reveals itself under pressure. Difficulties don't just build character, they reveal it. And this revelation, even when it exposes weaknesses, is valuable because it shows exactly where you need to work. There's a specific Stoic practice for this: active reframing. When something bad happens, force yourself to list 3 possible benefits. Lost your job. 1. Opportunity to explore a new career. 2. Time to develop neglected skills. 3. Test of financial resilience and creativity. Relationship ended. 1. Freedom to rediscover who you are alone. 2. Lessons on what you truly value in a partnership. 3. Space for personal growth without compromise. This isn't toxic positive thinking that denies real hardship. It's a pragmatic recognition that every situation, no matter how challenging, contains seeds of opportunity. The trick is developing the eyes to see them and the courage to cultivate them. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, training yourself to desire what happens, not because it's pleasant, but because it's the material you have to work with. Marcus Aurelius, facing a plague that decimated his empire, didn't waste energy wishing the plague away. Instead, he focused on how he could use the crisis to demonstrate virtuous leadership, to innovate public health responses, to deepen his compassion for those suffering. The plague was horrific, but his response to it could be magnificent. The power of mental preparation. Constant mental preparation was what separated the Stoics from ordinary people who are constantly surprised and overwhelmed by life. They understood that the unprepared mind is vulnerable to every shock, every change, every unexpected twist. But the prepared mind, she receives every event, no matter how surprising, with equanimity and a readiness for an appropriate response. This preparation went far beyond negative premeditation. It was a constant cultivation of mental flexibility, of multiple perspectives, of contingency plans, not just for specific events, but for entire categories of experience. The Stoics developed what we might call response templates, pre-built mental frameworks for dealing with common types of challenges. For example, they had a template for dealing with insults and criticism. Epictetus taught, when insulted, first ask yourself if the criticism is true. If it is, be grateful for the helpful information and work to improve. If it isn't, why bother with someone's incorrect opinion? This simple framework eliminates the need to emotionally process each criticism from scratch. You already have a ready-made, tested, effective response. Similarly, they had templates for loss. Seneca practiced what he called poverty rehearsal, periodically living as if he had lost everything. This wasn't just about experiencing deprivation, but about developing mental and practical strategies for coping with loss. When you've mentally and even physically rehearsed loss, your fear of it diminishes dramatically. Mental preparation also included what the Stoics called reservation clauses. Whenever they made plans or expressed intentions, they mentally added, if the gods will, or if nothing prevents. This wasn't superstition, but a realistic recognition that the future is uncertain and plans may need to be adjusted. This small mental reserve prevents shock, fear, and frustration when things don't go as planned. Imagine the difference between saying, I will get that promotion, versus, I will do my best to get that promotion if circumstances allow. The former creates a rigid expectation that, if frustrated, causes suffering. The latter maintains mental flexibility and preparedness for multiple outcomes. You still give your all, but without rigid attachment to a specific outcome. The Stoics also practiced what we might call mental wargaming, regularly imagining different scenarios and their ideal responses. How would you deal with betrayal? By a close friend, a diagnosis of a serious illness, sudden success and fame. By thinking through these scenarios in advance, when, if they occurred, you wouldn't be formulating a response in the heat of the moment. The strength of philosophical community. While Stoicism strongly emphasizes self-reliance and inner strength, the ancient Stoics deeply understood the value of philosophical community. They were not isolated hermits, but men deeply engaged with other seekers of wisdom. Seneca exchanged frequent letters with Lucilius, offering and receiving insights. Marcus Aurelius learned from Epictetus through the writings of Arrian. There was a vibrant network of mutual support and shared growth. This community served multiple purposes. First, accountability. It's easy to rationalize lapses in your principles when you're the only observer. But when you have others who share your values, observing and offering honest feedback, it's much harder to stray. The Stoics didn't hesitate to call each other out when they saw inconsistencies between words and actions. Second, perspective. When you're immersed in a problem, it can be difficult to apply Stoic principles objectively. Another practitioner can offer the clear perspective you need. They can remind you of the dichotomy of control when you're obsessed with the uncontrollable. They can offer reframes you can't see from within the situation. They can share how they've dealt with similar challenges. Third, inspiration. Seeing others successfully apply Stoic principles in difficult situations strengthens your own resolve. When Seneca was exiled, he drew strength from the examples of other philosophers who had faced exile with dignity. When Marcus Aurelius faced impossible decisions, he drew inspiration from historical examples of virtuous leaders. Community provides living models that the principles truly work. In the modern era, this community can take many forms. local study, groups, online forums, book clubs focused on Stoic texts, even individual partnerships where two people commit to mutual growth through Stoic principles. The important thing is not the form, but the function, having others who understand and share your philosophical journey. Community also provides opportunities to teach, and teaching is one of the best ways to deepen your own understanding. When you need to explain a Stoic principle to someone, you are forced to clarify your own thinking. When you help another apply the dichotomy of control, you strengthen your own practice. The Stoics understood that teaching and learning are inseparable. Conclusion: your journey begins now. We've reached the end of this in-depth exploration of the 7 practices that made the Stoics unflappable. But for you, this isn't an end. It's a beginning. The knowledge you've absorbed is only valuable if it's transformed into practice, into action, into real change in how you navigate life. The Stoics weren't abstract theorists, but dedicated practitioners who tested their philosophy in the laboratory of real life. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. Marcus Aurelius, even after decades of practice, still remembered the same basic principles, still struggled with the same human tendencies. Stoicism isn't about achieving an impossible state of perfection, but about constant progress, about being slightly better today than yesterday, about responding a little more wisely to each challenge. The 7 practices we explore: the dichotomy of control, cosmic perspective, negative forethought, voluntary adversity, reserved judgment, anchoring in virtue, and connecting with the Logos, are not just isolated techniques. They work synergistically, each strengthening the others. When you practice the dichotomy of control, you naturally develop better perspective. When you cultivate cosmic perspective, reserved judgment becomes easier. When you anchor in virtue, your connection with the Logos deepens. The modern world desperately needs this ancient wisdom. We live in times of unprecedented anxiety, where the speed of change, information overload, and complexity of choices can be overwhelming. But the principles that guided a Roman emperor through plagues and wars, that empowered a slave to become one of history's greatest philosophers, that allowed a senator to face death with dignity, these same principles can transform your modern life experience. Imagine yourself a year from now, having consistently practiced these 7 techniques. You face challenges with calm confidence, knowing you have the mental tools to handle any situation. Criticism doesn't destabilize you because you've developed reserved judgment. Losses don't devastate you because you've practiced negative forethought and cosmic perspective. Change doesn't frighten you because you've cultivated flexibility through voluntary adversity. You're no longer tossed back and forth by life's waves. You've learned to surf, but don't wait a year. Start today, now. Choose one practice. I suggest starting with the dichotomy of control because it's the most fundamental. For the next 7 days, apply it consistently. Each time you feel anxiety or frustration, arising, pause and ask, is this within my control? If it isn't, consciously release the worry. If it is, focus your energy on appropriate action. After a week, add the second practice. Perhaps 5 minutes each morning of cosmic perspective, remembering your place in the grand scheme of things. Gradually, week by week, incorporate the other practices. There's no rush. Stoicism is a philosophy of life, not a weekend workshop. It's a journey of gradual transformation, not an overnight revolution. Find your tribe. Seek out others interested in growth through Stoic wisdom. Share this video with someone who could benefit from these teachings. Start conversations about how to apply these principles in specific situations. The philosophical journey doesn't have to be a solitary one. In fact, it's enriched by sharing it with other seekers. Keep a journal. The Stoics were great proponents of written reflection. Marcus Aurelius never intended his meditations to be published. They were his personal reflections, his way of processing and internalizing Stoic principles. Each night, spend a few minutes writing, "How did I practice?" The dichotomy of control today. Where did I maintain proper perspective? Where can I improve tomorrow? Be compassionate with yourself. Stoicism is not about self-punishment or harsh criticism. It is about constant growth with self-compassion. When you fail to apply a principle, and you will fail, we all do, simply notice, learn, and commit to doing better the next time. Every moment offers a new chance to practice. Remember what's at stake. It's not just about reducing stress or better coping with problems, although those are valuable benefits. It's about living a life of integrity, purpose, and wisdom. It's about becoming the kind of person others can count on in times of crisis. It's about leaving a legacy not of material accumulation, but of character and virtue. The Stoics believed that philosophy without action is empty, that wisdom unapplied is wasted. You now possess knowledge that billions of people throughout history would give anything to have. The question isn't whether you can apply these practices. You absolutely can. The question is, will you? The future is coming with all its unknown challenges, hidden opportunities, and tests of character. You can face it unprepared, vulnerable to every wind of change, or you can face it armed with wisdom tested for millennia, equipped with mental tools that have transformed ordinary people into extraordinary examples of human resilience. The choice, as always in Stoicism, is completely within your control. If this content resonated with you, if you feel the call to develop unshakable inner strength, then don't let this moment pass you by. Subscribe to the channel to continue your journey of philosophical growth. Each video is an opportunity to deepen your understanding and strengthen your practice. Leave a like as a commitment to yourself that you will no longer be a victim of circumstances, but a conscious author of your responses to life. Share this video with someone who is struggling, someone who could benefit from this ancient wisdom. Sometimes a single idea, a single principle can completely change the trajectory of a life. Be the vehicle of that transformation for someone. In the comments, share which of the 7 practices you commit to starting this week. Publicly declare your intention. There is power in public commitment, in joining a community of practitioners. You are not alone on this journey. Thousands of others are discovering and applying these same principles, facing similar challenges, celebrating similar victories. Remember the words of Marcus Aurelius: what we resolve to do immediately after waking up, is of great importance. Tomorrow, when you wake up, you can choose to live reactively, at the mercy of every event and emotion, or you can choose to live philosophically, applying time-tested wisdom to navigate with grace and strength through any storm. The ancient Stoics left this legacy for you. It was not intended for scholars in ivory towers, but for real people facing real problems. Epictetus was a slave. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire in crisis. Seneca navigated the deadly court of a tyrant. If they could apply these principles in their extreme circumstances, surely you can apply them in your life. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Your journey to imperturbability, to unshakable inner peace, to indestructible strength of character begins with the decision you make now. Not tomorrow, not Monday, not next year. Now. You have the tools, you have the knowledge, you have inspiring examples throughout history. The only thing missing is your decision to begin. The Stoics await, wisdom awaits, your best self awaits. The question remains, are you ready to never again be unnecessarily affected by life's ups and downs? Are you ready to develop an inner citadel that no external circumstance can breach? Are you ready to join the ranks of those who have found strength in wisdom, peace in virtue, and freedom in understanding? Your answer will determine not only how you experience the coming days, weeks, and months, but how you will look back on your life in its final moments. Will you see a life lived at the mercy of circumstances, or a life lived with purpose, dignity, and unwavering wisdom? The choice has always been, is, and always will be yours. Choose wisely. Choose stoically. Choose now.